Welcome to the Straight Line Podcast. And here today I've got Jean Spies having a chat with us. Now, a lot of you guys watching probably are familiar with the track and Jean and who he is and what he's doing. But for there's a lot of guys that will be watching this that aren't familiar. Jean is currently in Paris between events. Jean's racing the prestigious Nations Cup tournament that's currently been held in Europe. John, tell us a little bit more about where you are, why you are.
So I'm currently doing the UCI Track Champions League, and firstly, hi. So we're doing the Track Champions League in Paris this week, but the Track Champions League is over 5 weeks. The first week was in Palma, Mallorca, nice island life type thing, and then last week was in Berlin. This week in Paris, and next week we have 2 rounds in London. The UCI Track Champions League is the prestigious track race in the world. Kind of want to equate it to, it's easy to equate it to the Tour de France, but it doesn't have the same backing with points, etc., etc. But the reason why I say it is to that extent is only the top 18 riders in the world in the sprint and the endurance side of things get invited to do this event. So firstly, for a sprint, it's sprint in Kieran. They modify the races slightly to create a bit more of an exciting and faster race. So firstly, for the sprint, it is a 3-up match sprint as opposed to a 2-up traditionally. And the Kieran is down to 5 laps as opposed to the 6 laps that the UCI race or the 8 laps that Japan races. So it's all designed for short, sharp racing. If you had to look at the endurance side, the scratch race is down to 5 kilometers. And then obviously your eliminations are stand-ups, straight up standard elimination with lots of chaos. But yeah, it's the prestigious track race in the world that we were fortunate enough to race and be able to represent not just ourselves, our countries, but also our personal sponsors for a change that creates a bit of a different thing because track cycling in itself is a federation-based sport, and all the federations, all the governments are actually behind their athletes. Unfortunately, for me, it's not the case. Like I have to fund everything myself through crowdfunding, etc. But yeah, as for this event, at least we get to put our own personal sponsors on our clothing for their own representation and a bit more exposure to what we as athletes have to go through to find sponsorship for ourselves or funding.
Yeah, because I've been following it, I've been watching it. I see the riders are all riding in their non-conventional jerseys. Now, has that got to do with the sponsors of the riders, or is that federation sponsors that actually having the sponsors on the jersey as opposed to the federation?
So there's a bit of to and fro within that. Firstly, the event is sponsored by a clothing manufacturer. So that clothing manufacturer has to make clothing for all 75 riders. Each rider gets 2 sets of kit. If there's any crashes, it has to be replaced within the next week, etc., etc., etc. Because it's not a Nations Cup or something like that, there's a bit more leeway in a sense of what clothing can be used. But simply because the event is of the magnitude it is, and the event is covering the cost of the riders, they kind of get to say what they feel will be best for them and for our sponsors. So yeah, clothing is non-conventional. It's an Italian brand. I can't remember what it's called. To be honest, it's okay. It's okay. It does the job. I quite like the designs that they've got this year compared to last year and the year before. It's a bit more out there, which I enjoy. And yeah, it's designed for show, and even with the clothing in that sense, it's all for show as much as what they're all of a similar design. It's obviously your own home country colors, which makes it a bit more unique.
Okay, so it's not strictly by the rule books. If you go to an international UCI event and you go with your federation's colors, you need to meet all the certain criteria and color strips. But it's kind of a lot more, I don't want to say lenient here, but not as by the book, is my understanding.
Yes, correct? Definitely. Yeah.
Okay. And then you talk about branding. Now, you've got an Italian manufacturer is endorsing the clothing for this event. I know that you've been working a lot with Rule 28. Now, not to put you on the spot, How would you compare the quality? I mean, I know I've seen all the stuff that you post. Rule 28 seems to be quite involved in the testing of the equipment.
So Rule 28 basically started off with Hoob Wattbike. Now, there'll be very, very few people that watch this that know what Hoob Wattbike is, but Hoob Wattbike was basically a bunch of student engineers or freshly out of university engineers that wanted to beat GB cycling at their own race.
Yes.
They wanted to beat GB in the team pursuit at their national championships. So the leading, or the guy that kind of the face of it, was Dan Bigham. And Dan decided to develop little parts that could create a big impact. And he started off with Rule 28 with Sam in developing socks. Now, as much as what socks kind of seem insignificant, there is huge gains within the sock. If you had to look at how, so if you're traveling, get a little technical, but if you're traveling at 50 kilometers an hour and you're pedaling at, let's say, 100 RPM, how fast are your feet actually moving? Your feet are moving at 85, 90 kilometers an hour. So because of that, there's a whole lot more drag within that. And that's why the sock development came to what it is. There is huge advantages of looking at the aerodynamics of the socks, but also in the clothing. So yeah, just to answer your question, the clothing that we've got right now is probably would rank up to, I'm going to say, Sam's basic, or Rule 28's basic level of clothing. Okay. They have what they call a V2 suit, which is, I don't exactly know the prices, but it's not over the top expensive. Well, for South Africans it is, but it's not a Vortex suit. So yeah, this clothing kind of equates to that. The beauty of that within the TCL is because everybody's in the same clothing. It kind of takes marginal gains within the skin suits out, although we can still use our own overshoes, gloves, helmets, etc. And yeah, just to put into perspective of how important socks are at my racing speed at 70 kilometers an hour, aero socks versus a standard cotton sock was 47 watts difference in the tunnel last time we tested. So yeah, a huge difference. And yeah, that just shows you the importance of the clothing. And sometimes it can be the bearer of my existence, because people want to give us clothing that is not too standard and not too specific to the track and specific to the sprint. If you had to look at what has happened with the not the Olympics, but in preparation for the Olympics, everybody, all the nations that want to race Olympics have to register clothing. GB registered 17 different skin suits with different patterns and different patents, all for different aerodynamic purposes. You can kind of go technical, how much are they kind of trying to throw everybody off, but ultimately there's 17 different types of materials that will show you different results, and it'll be for different speeds and different race conditions, etc. I know, for example, Ashton Lambie, when he did his 4K IP record, he even had a skin suit that was developed for different temperatures. So there's so much that goes into clothing, obviously clothing development, clothing R&D, that it's not even like opening a can of worms. Is an understatement when you had to go down that rabbit hole.
Okay, I can just imagine, because you guys are going so fast. For the conventional guy that rides up and down the main road where he trains, these guys are getting 50k an hour for a relatively short distance, and which is not a bad feat. But I mean, in the flying 200 or going into last sprint, last step, I mean, just to put things in perspective, so the guys out there can understand, what sort of speeds are you guys sitting at in the last lap going into either Kieran or two match sprint?
So the speeds, if you had to look at it on TV, are played down. It's really played down to such an extent that you kind of go, oh, but it's easy. It doesn't do that. If you had to look at the Kieran, so we'll take this weekend coming as an example for those that are going to watch. You'll have an average speed on the clock, and the average speed is generally like, let's say, between 10, I'm going to say 9.7 to about 10.3. But what you don't know, and what most people don't realize, is that is only the average speed for the last 200 meters.
Yes.
So by that point, the race is already slowing down. And so to put that into perspective, a 10-0, so roughly in the middle there, is 72 kilometers an hour by average. So yeah, we're hitting big speeds. If you're doing a flying 200, 75, 80 kilometers an hour, it's not unheard of. Jeffrey Hoogland actually attempted the 200-meter world record last night.
Yeah, so
he missed the record by 0.03. But he averaged 78.8 kilometers an hour for the event. So that tells you he roughly hit 83 k's an hour, if I had to guess. So yeah, a huge speeds that we're doing. And yeah, I think the only time where you really see how fast it is on TV is when the guys actually hit the deck and you see how fast they slide.
Well, how far they slide. I mean, 80k an hour, that's significant. Well, and I'm glad you brought up Jeffrey's tent yesterday. I was watching it. I had a look at it this morning when I woke up. The record was 9, but was still Nicholas Paul, 9.100. And he actually had two goes at it. He got the 9.13, then I think like a 9.2 soon after that.
Yes. Yeah.
So Nicholas Paul still has the record.
So Jeff's original attempt, Nico has the record. Yakovlev has the unofficial record of the 9.0. I think it's 9.03, but it was done when he was still riding for Russia, and it's not an official UCI event. So, but yeah, Nico has the official record of a 9.1, which was set in Bolivia. The significance of that is the fact that it was done at 3,000 meters above sea level. Yeah, just if you had to kind of look at that with aerodynamics, the higher you go from sea level, the faster guys are going to travel because there's less air density. Although you kind of battle to breathe, so it is a trade-off. I know Jeff had, for example, a nebulizer that he was actually sitting with this thing on in between airfits to try and get as much oxygen in as he possibly could. But yeah, going back to Jeff, he broke the kilo world record 2 days ago with a 55.8. So 55.8 seconds from a standing start over 1,000 meters is stupidly fast. If you had to just break it down into little segments, first lap was a 17.5, second lap was a 12.0. A 12.0 average for 12.0 is 74 kilometers an hour. So he was touching on 76 k's an hour from standstill within 1,000 meters, within the first 500 actually. So yeah, magnificent and epic feat that he's done there. He's broken the oldest track record in existence. But now obviously he wanted to do the 200. I think the 200 was more just for fun, and because we're here, we might as well give it a try. But yeah, it's you can always kind of speculate as to what he could have done better, what he could have improved, or etc. I think if Jeff had the form that he had at Olympics, he would have easily broken that 200-meter record. Even still, I think the kilo would have been faster with that form that he had there. Again, it's always easy to say these things
after the fact.
You'll never really know the truth. Yeah. So yeah, it's just sorry.
The interesting thing that I've noticed, or I mean, it's no state secret. Francois Purvis, he rode a 96 for that time, and Jeff ran a 126-inch gear. So, you know, the way the world is moving and the way the sport is moving, and bigger, higher speeds, you need to have more torque at high speeds. I get that, but I mean, a 30-inch gear difference, and that Francois' time has stood for that long. What's your take on that?
I don't think Francois rode 102. Sorry, a 92. I think it was more close to 102, 108. I will ask Francois next time I see him, and I'll get back to you as to what he did. But yeah, there's a big gearing difference. Ultimately, the sport has evolved, and I think it's something that I'm going to say it frustrates me when I go back to South Africa, is the fact that the gearing is as small as what it is. You know, people will argue with me about it and tell me why they think it's better. But ultimately, if it was better, the rest of the world would be doing that.
Yeah.
It's the reason why we're all on bigger gears. And for me to go home and race there, I literally have to change gearing to suit the racing in South Africa, because it doesn't equate to as faster racing. It doesn't equate to as positive racing. So therefore, I have to kind of change it up. To explain to you, and hopefully this will kind of get to the riders that need it, to explain why we're riding bigger gears. Simple fact of the human body is designed and developed, or as in physiologically designed, to take torque better than RPM. If you had to look at neurological fatigue or fatigue factors, doesn't matter how you want to read it, how you want to kind of study it or look into it, your body will recover faster from a torque fatigue factor than what it will recover from a RPM fatigue factor. Silly test a rider can do is go and do a flying 500 on a, I don't know, 88, 85, and then put 120 or 130 on and go and do the same effort. And afterwards, you'll kind of stand there going, my body feels completely different. I can actually breathe now, whereas before I couldn't. So yeah, it sounds silly. It sounds that simple as well, but it's not. It's something that needs to be trained. It's something that needs to be taught as well. So yeah, it's the only way that we're going to develop faster is by doing that. Obviously, from an endurance perspective, you kind of need to look at the lulls of the racing, etc., which does take into consideration that you will need to ride a smaller gear than the sprinters. I mean, for us, it's easy. You just hit it as hard as you possibly can. And that's it. Whereas the endurance riders are having to kind of factor the lulls and all the rest of it. But their gearing is still big. I mean, I know some of the girls are running 110 inches for their points races. So yeah, if our guys are not even running 110 at home, we've got a problem.
Yeah, that's definitely been a trend in the world these days. Yeah, the guys going bigger and bigger and bigger, but also with all of that, the guys are going quicker and quicker and quicker. You're talking now in Jeffrey's time. What was Jeffrey's time for the kilo? 55.8 or something.
55.88.
Yeah. So his average speed, I mean, I know it's not a fair reflection on the race at all, was like just call it under 60k an hour for round number's sake. But on lap 2, he was knocking on what, 70k an hour?
Yes, 74 k's an hour.
Or even 74k an hour. I mean, if you live at home, I mean, to the guys that are listening to this, go down a local drag in your neighborhood or down a hill and hit 74k an hour. Look down at your speedometer and you're going to go, geez, this is pretty quick. Now this guy's doing that from a standing start. Yeah,
I'm not being rude. Sorry, I want to actually calculate what his RPM was for you.
Oh, there we go.
70. So he ran a 70 chainring with a 15 sprocket.
70-15, yeah.
And he rode 74 k's an hour. He was doing 126 RPM. So his legs are still not turning very slowly.
No, that's 126. That's significant. But a 70-15 from a standstill, the east side. Yeah. That's significant.
Yeah, no, I mean, the torque and the strength that is needed to get that gear going is immense. That's why guys like Jeff and myself, we spend so much time in the gym. And I know it's a trend with endurance riders as well. They're spending a lot more time in the gym to build that strength in order to move those big gears faster. Ultimately, the more strength you have, and the faster you can turn that gear, the faster you can go. But if you can turn a bigger gear at the same speed, you're going to go even faster. Again, simple in theory, but to put it into practice takes a lot of time.
Yeah, a long time and a lot of consistent hard work to get that power up, because it doesn't just happen. It's a very specific training load that you have to look at. Next topic I'd like to discuss with you that's coming up, Paris 2024.
Yeah,
I would imagine that would feature on your radar, something that you would want to do.
Definitely.
Obviously, you would have figured out what steps need to be taken, what boxes need to be ticked. Is that starting to work? Are you working towards that? Are the boxes coming together for you?
So I'm definitely working towards Paris. The qualification criteria is a lot more complicated than what most people would anticipate or think. So for the track riders, the qualification period is a 2-month cycle. Sorry, 2 month. It's a 2-year cycle, of which your first year, your first 2 Nations Cups, your Continental Champs and your World Champs results count towards your Olympic qualification. Same thing with the next year. So you have a cycle of 8 events that you have to utilize to qualify for the games. Although considering that you need to have done class events to qualify to do those events. So to go, for example, to class 1, you have to have 10 UCI points before you can start racing class 1. You need to have 250 UCI points in order to race a Nations Cup. For World Championships, you have to be ranked within, so endurance is top 24, sprint it's top 32, and the Kieran is also top 24. So those are the minimum requirements to just start those events. From there, you still have to be selected by your federation to do these races, and then only can you go from there. Within that, it becomes a whole lot more complicated because it's got the sprint, the Kieran, and the team sprint are all blanketed in one qualification criteria. So if you had to, for simplicity's sake, you have to be ranked within the top 32 in the world in order to qualify for the games. So yeah, it's definitely something on my radar. It's definitely something that I've been working towards and aiming towards. It's the most prestigious race in the world for us, especially as a track rider. I think the value that is placed on the Olympics in South Africa is so undervalued. If you were to look at it from the rest of the world's perspective, I know, for example, Aussies, they literally just don't give about any other race other than the Olympic Games, because that is where their funding comes from. And yeah, it's, if you had to equate the road, it's basically the road's biggest and best, the big Tour de France, and if you want to kind of look at all the Grand Tours, that is what the Olympics is to the track rider.
We were just talking here with Jean, and we were talking about the Australians and the Olympic cycle, and what it means to them.
So yeah, just as I reiterated, for example, the Australians and for most riders or most systems that are in search of gold medals here, the Olympics means everything. It is the pinnacle of the sport. It is, in essence, bigger than the Tour de France for the track riders. Most of the federations, most of these government systems all get their funding from results at the Olympics. So it means more to them than what world champs or anything like that would be. I know heard of stories of literally riders training through world championships and through Nations Cups because they need to get those results at the Olympics. And for them, it's a little easier because if they know they've qualified a spot for the games, they are able to firstly not do all the qualification system, or they can train through it. And then on top of that, they have enough riders within the system that allows them to send different riders to different places. So it gives the others more time to train, more time to peak. And yeah, it just shows you the importance of having structure, having riders at the level, and then obviously the importance of the Olympic Games for all these different federations.
I know it might not be an open number, but if you had to look at a team like a nation like Australia, it's important for them to go there to Olympics and get medals, gold medals, and stand on the podium. But with it being the most important, I would imagine there's some kind of financial remuneration for the squad as a whole to keep everything going. So if a team like Australia or the Netherlands or Canada, one of the big teams, if they have a really good Olympics, do they basically does that secure them or semi-guarantee them funding from their country so that they can pursue another 4 years by going to the Nation Cups and doing all these camps? Is that how it works with the big nations?
So that's generally how it works, yes. It's a little bit more complicated within that. So they'll have, for example, the results at Olympics, and then they'll have, I know I'm talking out of turn, but so GB, for example, their World Championships, the World Championships before the Olympic Games started, was also one of the points that they needed to match to get extra funding. So they, if if I'm not mistaken, they get they're 37 million pounds per year for the cyclists or for the track riders to race to qualify for the Olympic Games. Then that World Championships before the Olympic cycle starts, they get additional, I think it's additional 10 million a year if they meet that cycle's criteria as well. So to put into perspective of how much funding a lot of these teams have is generally their budget for one Nations Cup per rider, so just one rider's Nations Cup budget is more than my entire year's budget. They run on 2-to-1 staff ratios. Obviously, they have anything and everything that's possible in order to make riders fast. So dietitians, physios, sports therapists, physiologists, you can kind of, the list is as long as you like. But it's in order to get more funding, to get riders to the level that they need. So yeah, it is very dependent on that. I think the problem lies in the fact that for us, we only look at those results or those events for results. If we had to look at the track at home, and I'll use something that's about to come up, African Continental Champs, South Africa generally sends like 25 riders to Continental Champs, and we do dominate Continental Champs. But my biggest question with that is, what are we doing with that result to generate funding? It all looks good on paper. Oh, you have, I don't know, 15 gold medals, but what does that mean for the riders? And I think that's where the loss in translation is. We need to make it, in a personal opinion, again, a simpler step, or a simpler process. So if you, for example, had to have riders winning Continental Champs, they'll get X. Okay, then, well, you're winning class 1s or 2s, or you're podiuming there, we'll give you a little bit more, etc., etc. So building a platform that riders are actually being funded from that point. And we have to start somewhere. We can't start at the top. It's so pointless to say, because a rider's 25th in the world, we can't fund them. I mean, that's ridiculous. But ultimately, that rider's gotten there on their own. So we need to actually do something in order to create a system that is helping riders from the bottom to the top, as opposed to trying to jump in at the top where it's easy to go, but you see we didn't get results, and then try and filter it down. Again, it's a system that needs to be kind of fixed or redone, in my opinion, within that. But yeah, it's very difficult when you don't have the funding, you don't have the people backing it, and you don't have the infrastructure that is actually designed to collect funding and to collect sponsorship on that level.
Yeah, it's a pity. I mean, you said a number there, 37 million pounds. That's just short of 800,000 rands. I mean, that's
not 800,000. That's 800 million.
Sorry, 800 million. Sorry, I'm pulling a Jacob Zuma here. 800 million rands. You can do a lot with that. But it is what it is. Hopefully, going forward, things can change. You can make things better for the Jean Spies that are 15 years old now, wanting to get involved in track cycling, wanting to get involved in that. Next thing I talk about, I believe that you've been involved with the Belgian national team this year, with their sprint squad.
So yes, I've been involved with Belgium. I was training with the Belgium sprint squad now. What happened in Belgium is, obviously, we all know traditionally Belgium is a huge cycling nation. It is arguably the biggest within the sport, not recreational as well. But from a racing perspective, they've never had a sprint structure or sprint program. They've always focused on endurance racing. And Tim Coswell, their new head coach, has come in and tried to create a different sprint program. And he's done remarkable things there with the little that he has. But what he's done is he's tried to create a sprint program, and then invites riders like myself to do training stints with his riders. So in essence, trying to rub off on them in the right way. At the same time, for me, a rider that kind of hops around trying to find not time to train, but places to train and structures to to be able to do things. It does make my life a little easier because it just gives me a base for a good set amount of time with a solid track to race on. On top of that, you have, for example, Tim that can ride the motorbike. There's not many people in the world that can do 85 k's an hour on a motorbike on the track. So within that, it your pool for coaches to work with or places to train kind of drastically, and that's why it is so difficult for guys like myself to actually make these things work. So yeah, I was fortunate enough to work with the Belgians. I'm fortunate enough to work with quite a couple of squads in that manner. So yeah, I wouldn't say I float around, but I do float around a little bit, and then I'm able to train with these squads and with people that actually know how to ride the motorbike at those speeds. It is, from a rider's perspective, absolutely nerve-wracking when you're sitting behind a motorbike at those speeds and the motorbike starts sliding up and down the track. But that's the speed we're racing at, so it's a kind of this thing that's just, you need to just get it done. Obviously, I've witnessed a few big accidents within those things happening, but it's the risk that we have to take as riders. We know the track is the safest place of the sport. It's just, you're pushing the limits every day, and every now and again, unfortunately, things do not plan out the way you wanted it to.
All right, cool. Jean, thanks very much for the chat. So I have to cut it short here. Eskom is going to be playing its games again. But yeah, good luck for the rest of your campaign there, watching on TV. And thanks for the insight. I think a lot of people that watching this will not really understand the type of speed you guys are going at. You're saying now that the guy on the motorbike is going at 85 kilometers an hour on a 250-meter track. There's a guy on a bike behind you. It's also going 85 k an hour. That's fast. That's silly fast.
Yeah. To just give you a little bit of insight there, I know of some coaches that actually wear a weightlifting belt because of the G-forces that he's carrying on the motorbike. So always good fun.
All right, cool. Jean, thanks for the chat to say. Good luck, man.
Thank you very much, Jeremy.
Okay, catch you later.
Thanks, guys. Ciao, ciao.